Tonight, we're discussing Meant to Be Mine by Hannah Orenstein. Everyone's loading in now. Okay, looks like everyone is in now. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight as we get to talk to author Hannah Orenstein about her latest book, Meant to Be Mine. Hannah is a deputy lifestyle editor at Bustle currently. She has also written for 17 Magazine's website as well as Elite Daily. And apart from Meant to Be Mine, she's also the author of 3 other novels. So welcome, Hannah. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everybody who came out. I'm excited for this.
Oh, we have one more. There, sorry. Okay, we do this a little bit informal. I have some questions prepared for you, but if anybody at any point has any questions they want to ask, if you don't want to talk on camera, just feel free to add it in the little question box. And if not, just like give us a sign so we can call on you. Hannah, I've been following you on Instagram since I learned about you. Actually, you were recommended by one of our girls, Ali Behar, who is on here. She's there with her roommate. She has read other books of yours in the past, and she's the one who directed me to you. So thanks, Ali.
Thank you, Ali.
Hi.
Before we get started, I see on IG that you write in various different places, sometimes the boat, sometimes outdoors. I'm a journalist myself, and I don't know how you do that. So I was wondering before we start, if you can give us a little bit of your writing process and how this idea came about.
Yeah, sure. So pretty much the entire time I've been writing fiction, I've had a full-time job, as most authors do, many authors do. And so, I started writing in different places just to give myself a break from a screen, because it's really exhausting to stare at a laptop all day and, your phone, and then just like have to do it again after you finish working. So yeah, I often write longhand, and I got that idea from Ellen Hilderbrand. I don't know if you guys read her stuff or like her work. I'm a huge fan of hers. And I always used to see these photos of her like by the pool or like out on the beach, like with friends. And like she would just have a big yellow legal pad. And I really liked that idea of, not being tethered to a laptop. And so now my entire life is just like, I have these all over my house. So I'm really lucky that during the summer I live in Maine with my family. And so, there's just tons of outdoor space there. So my favorite place to write is outside. And also about the book. That's why we're here. It's been a long day. This is Meant to Be Mine. It is my 4th novel. It's a rom-com. It came out in June. And it is about a woman who knows the exact day that she's going to meet the love of her life, thanks to a prophecy made by her very eccentric, fabulous grandma named Gloria, as you know. And the book starts on the day that Edie is supposed to meet her match, but things don't go exactly as she had planned or expected. And I started writing this book in the very early days of the pandemic. It was April 2020. And, back then we really didn't know what was going on. Like nothing was certain. It was a really scary time. And we didn't know how long this was going to last. But at the time, it was like, like 2-3 weeks inside feels like a really long time. And there were a lot of things I missed. So the number one thing that I wanted to do as soon as it was safe was hug my grandparents. And so from that wish, Gloria's character was born. I could just hear her speaking so clearly. And I just, I was really fascinated by this idea of writing, a really feisty older character. And then, I was like, okay, but I write about younger people, so how is she involved? And then I was like, oh, she'll have this granddaughter. And I really missed wearing clothes that weren't sweatpants. And so Edie became a stylist. That's why that happened. I missed travel. So there's some travel in the book. The meet cute on the plane is stolen. I'm not going to say inspired, stolen from my sister, who met a very cute guy on the plane like a week before the pandemic. They were on a flight together, and then they were on the same flight back. And I was like, that's a rom-com. Like, that's a rom-com.
Are they still together? Are they together at all?
No, oh my God, no.
Did they survive the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic broke things up, but he did find the book recently, and he texted my sister, and he was like, but yeah, and I mean, what else did I miss? I just missed, the vibrancy of New York City, like the restaurants, the bars, the people, the just activity. And so I wanted the book set in Williamsburg, which was my neighborhood. And so, yeah, that's how the book came together. It was really just everything that I missed and loved. And during the pandemic, it really was the thing that kept me going, because every day I could dip into this world that was completely unlike the world that was currently unfolding around us.
I love that the plane story is a real story. I was a travel journalist for 8 years, and I think every flight, a few a month, I would wait for that cute guy to sit on next to me, and it never happened. So that is like 1 in a million chance for her.
I know, and he's really hot too. Like,
before we get started to the questions, does anybody want to give their comments on what they thought about the book? I will go first. I personally loved it. I blew right through it. I am not Jewish, so I really liked the tidbits of the Jewish culture and the games and stuff. It taught me a lot about it, and the love story. And I loved that it wasn't what you were predicting was going to happen at the end.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I do have one question, unrelated to the storyline or the book, but what does sitting Shiva mean?
Oh, sitting Shiva is a Jewish custom where after somebody dies, there is a period of mourning for 7 days. And so people after the funeral typically go to, the house of the, spouse or family or whoever. And people bring over food, people, sit with you for days. And it's just this period where, you don't have to feel alone.
Okay, got it. Thank you. I love the Jewish references too. I loved the educational aspect of it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. One thing I was interested to see what the reception would be, because in some ways it's, more niche, but some of my favorite responses have been, I mean, like you said, you learn something new, and I think that's amazing. And I really appreciate that. And I love that. But I've also loved hearing from people who say, oh, my family is so, we're a completely different culture, completely different religion, race, whatever. But that's my grandma. That's how my mom talks to me. Food is really important in my culture, or traditions and holidays are really important to my family in the exact same way. And so I thought that was a really lovely response.
I agree. My grandma was probably not as fashionable as Gloria was, but the grandmother-granddaughter bond relationship, I related 1,000%, and how she felt after her grandma passed away 1,000,000%. So that was, I loved it more than the love story, to be honest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It was cool that their bachelor bachelorette was down here, because this is a South Florida based book club. So all the references to Miami hit home for all of us. Well, probably, actually, speak for us.
Good. I hope I got them right. My friend is from Miami, and I was just tell me
right on point. Right on point.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
Visualizing them at the fountain blue by the pool.
Amazing. Thank you.
Need to add a little bit more douchey guys to that scene.
Next time for the weekend thing.
So anybody else want to give their input on the book overall before we dive into the questions?
I mean, I'll say I'm Jewish, and I appreciated all the Jewish family references, and Gloria. I loved Gloria. She reminded me of my grandma. Not 100% the same, but loves her granddaughters. And then the other thing, I'm a triplet.
Oh,
and I loved the twin relationship, and how, I mean, I don't know if we're getting too far into it, but the two sisters took the prophecy and felt differently about it. One felt oh my God, this is a prison, and it's gonna take away all this life I could live, because I'm gonna meet who I'm supposed to be with so young. And the other one couldn't wait till and I feel like my sisters and I are very similar to that. I mean, we're all sisters and we love each other, but we're all very, very different personalities and different life directions and stuff like that. So I don't know, I loved it. I loved it. I loved all the characters, everything.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Okay, question number 1. Edie was very committed to the idea of finding her soulmate on the day her grandma Gloria predicts. Do you believe in soulmates?
I don't believe in soulmates. I think that we all have a lot of different people out there that we could fall in love with and be really happy with. And one of my favorite, just like teeny pieces of the book is on Edie and Theo's first date. They are sort of like walking in the park by the water, and it's where they have their first kiss. And she thinks about all the different paths that her life could have taken and all the different people that she could have been. And in the world of the book, the idea is that like this prophecy is going to find you no matter what choices you've made. Like it's going to happen no matter what you do. And so I really liked this idea that like even if fate is involved, there is still choice and destiny. And she chose to be in New York and be there in that moment with that person.
Anybody else? Does anybody have a soulmate story? No.
Just a show of hands, who believes? Oh, were you going to say something?
I feel like I have like best girlfriend soulmates more than dude soulmates.
I like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the word soulmate always reminds me, I don't know if there's any Sex and the City fans, but of that episode where, you know, they talk about soulmates and, you know, Carrie obviously has this like whatever relationship with Mr. Big, but at the end of the episode, it's like her soulmates are her friends. And I think different people can play different roles in your life. And I don't think like when you end a relationship, that's it, it's over. You're never gonna find a special person. I think there's, to your point, Hannah, like other people out there that you could be perfectly happy with. But I do think that there's people who you have special connections with, right? And so
Sure.
even though there may not be in your life anymore, but you can still kind of acknowledge that that was a unique connection that you had with that person, that perhaps you won't have that same exact connection with someone else.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's possible that there's soulmates out there, but there's what, like 8 billion people in the world. So to find that person is not really practical. And that's the thing about relationships. I think that it should be more practical as far as like your personalities and, you know, how you communicate, all those things that make a long-term relationship work. So possible, but not realistic.
Anyone else? Ileana, I know you just joined us. We're talking about the idea of soulmates and if you believe in soulmates.
I do believe in soulmates. Wholeheartedly. But I don't know if I believe that you can trace the day you're going to meet your soulmate to a specific day. I think there's a lot of pressure there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's another little story about that. I wrote this book, you know, 2+ years ago now. And like, I guess after a year, I got my friend's wedding invitation. And she's like, okay, my wedding is June 26th, 27th. I forgot what it was. And so my flight was on June 24th, which is the date in the book, Friday, June 24th, 2022, like the exact same day. I was going to be on a plane leaving from the same airport. And I was like, oh, like, this is weird. Like, this is like whoever I sit down next to on the plane, like, this is going to be a really big deal. And that was the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And there were mass protests and there was so much traffic that I couldn't get to the airport and I missed my flight.
Oh, wow.
So I was not to meet anybody.
You may have missed your soulmate, is what you're saying.
God, that's horrible.
Or they're coming another time. I don't know.
Yes. Okay, on the same notion, when it comes to love, do you think fate plays a role in it, or is it mostly timing and circumstances?
I think that timing is really important. I think that, you know, there are people that you, to your point, Melissa, I think, you know, there are people that you have a really special connection with, but, you know, the timing just doesn't work for whatever reason. And I think that's really important. I also think that choice matters. You know, you choose, you know, what are your values? You know, what kind of life do you want with your partner? You know, do you have the same goals in life? And so I really respect that so many people do believe in soulmates and have that spiritual aspect to their relationships. But I think for me personally, what I believe in is choice.
I agree. If we knew the date or who, like, do you feel like you would change the way you would live your life knowing that like you have an end date to your singledom or anything else?
Yeah. I mean, when I wrote this, I was like, oh yeah, of course. When I started writing it, I was like, of course I would want to know, like, that takes off so much pressure. I get to do whatever I want. Like, I know I'm going to meet somebody. I don't have to stress about it. But as I started writing this, I was like, there are so many complications. This would be terrible. I would not wish this on anybody, except for Edie, who I spent some time with. But yeah, so I would not. But show of hands, would any of you want to know the day that you meet the love of your life?
No.
And if I ever did, your book like convinced me that I didn't.
I think part of me does want to, but then
Yeah.
it takes away like the fun part of it, I think.
Me too. I feel like part of me would want to know just because I feel like I'm that type of person. Like the type A in me is like, oh, I want to know, the exact date. But I do think that then you would kind of do life differently, right? So that would be kind of the downside of it, that you would approach things differently or, act differently or whatever it is. And I do like, the way you phrased it. I think choice, like the older you get, you realize you're in relationship with whoever, a friend, a boyfriend, a husband, by choice. Like we could do life on our own perfectly fine, but we choose to be with people. So I think that choice piece is exciting, right? To be able to know that you can choose someone and they can choose you, obviously.
I think like for me, now that I'm in a relationship, I like how it played out, not knowing what was going to happen. But if you would have told me in my single days, you can guarantee that I would have met someone on X day, I might have taken it, because I remember many nights that I was like, will I ever find anyone? Am I doomed to be alone forever? So I might have said something different back then.
I think though that there's a certain point to, if you don't know you're going to meet someone, you're open to all these experiences in life, opportunities of meeting people, doing things, traveling. Maybe if we knew on November the 17th of 2022 we were going to meet the one, maybe we'd get lazy and think, oh, I don't need to go out with anybody. My friends are pushing me to meet this person. But no, because I know on that date, life would be half of the experience that we actually, have in pursuit of that soulmate. It's fun to get there.
And I think that a big part also of a relationship is having dated and like crossed off things that worked and didn't work with you to arrive to that person who like really fills your cup.
Definitely.
So if you don't have to do that, then I don't know if it would work.
Yeah.
I think also like you in past relationships you still fall in love with that person, and I feel like in this case you would kind of like limit yourself in falling in love with them because you're like, oh, this person is not it, but you would still, it's nice to have that even if it didn't work out with that one person, you still experience it, like someone else had mentioned the experiences.
Jared.
Yeah.
I liked him.
Thank you.
He was fun, but he had an unpredictable lifestyle too.
Ooh.
The guy she met, I can't remember his name now.
Theo.
Theo.
No, I feel bad for Jared.
Oh.
She loved him so much.
Jonah, yeah.
And you talk so much about that relationship. I'm like, oh, if Theo doesn't work out, she's gonna go hopefully back to Jared, and then poof, the girlfriend and the apartment, and I'm like, no.
That's what I thought was gonna happen.
Yeah.
I thought she was gonna end up with Jonah for sure.
Jonah. Did you ever plan on
Was
her
it
going
Jared
back?
or Jonah? Did I say the wrong name?
Jonah.
Sorry.
Hannah, did you ever plan on her going back to the ex while you were writing it?
I didn't. And I think to be very honest, I think part of that was because I was writing this after a breakup and I was like, don't go back. Like that's not what you're done. But I did, when I started writing the book, I had like Theo, I had Bennett, and I had Jonah, like just as like characters, but I hadn't mapped out what their relationships would be to all the other characters. And so and Max also, and I was like, oh, like could Max like maybe be, for Edie? And I was like, no, that doesn't work. Like, and so I was cycling through all these different options. There was also a point where Max was going to die, saved him from death. Yeah. A lot of things changed along the way, but I really liked writing Edie and Theo together because I think there is so much about him that she enjoys, but it's just not going to work. And that's, I think, a really hard thing for a lot of people to accept.
Was the killing off Max to show that like the date actually does mean something versus them saying beat the odds?
Yeah, like instead of Gloria dying and like that being the thing that shakes her faith in this prophecy, it would have been Max's death. But I think it's It doesn't quite work because like it's Edie's story. It's not about her sister. I mean, it is, but like that's not, the point of view that we're seeing.
I thought that you were gonna say like she did meet him on the right day and her soulmate ends up dying, because that's another factor of this. Like, what if you do meet your soulmate but then they die? Then you're destined to like a lonely life.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You get a second soulmate. Okay, well, this kind of leads us into the next question. What did you think of Ray's revelation, and how would you feel if you were Edie?
I felt bad for her that she had to keep this in for so long, especially when the person she's closest to in the whole world. And I can only imagine how heartbreaking that would be. I like that she rebelled and did something different. I think she's a rebellious person anyway. And she's this person who wanted so much out of her love life. She wanted all these experiences. She really, really did not want to be settled down young, but even if she like broke the rules, she still wound up with this person that she met at 18. So I think there's something like very romantic in that. If I were Edie, I would be really upset. I would be, I think, very betrayed. But I'm a sister. My sister and I are really close. And I just think ultimately like we would have to talk it out, figure it out, because like it's your sister,
Anybody else? What'd you think of that part of the book?
I was shocked. I was not expecting that. I think that was probably the biggest twist of the whole book.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know why. Don't ask me why, because obviously the more predictable would have been that she either ended up with Theo, I'm talking about Edie, or Jonah. But in my head, as soon as we met Bennett, I was like, I think she's gonna end up with Bennett. Like I had this hunch. I don't know why, like I said. But with the whole her sister and her not actually having met Max on the day her grandmother said, I was shocked. I was like, what? I would have never guessed. But I loved it. I loved it because I agree. Like it's very much in line with like her character and her personality. And you hear Edie talk about how she wanted to wait to get married until she was done with her, her medical school and her residency. And so it's in line with like her personality. So even though I was shocked, I was like, okay, that makes sense that she would have like rebelled against, her grandmother's, kind of, what is it called? Like prediction. Yeah.
I had to go back and be like, wait, when did she meet Bennett? When was it? Like, was it on that same day? And maybe we just overlooked it. And then I start thinking about everybody she met that day. I remember she talked to like a bartender on her way to the bathroom. I'm like, he's going to come back. I know it. And I never predicted that at the end.
Ooh, and then I love the whole, which I don't know if I'm getting ahead, Michelle.
The grandparents.
The link between them anyway, right? That even though it doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, that, there's a particular one person in your life, but the fact that they still had this beautiful connection, even though it wasn't necessarily because they met on this particular day, I thought that was great at the end to kind of say, people are connected in different ways. It may not always be about kind of who that soulmate is, but just people who you have really strong connections with,
That was the sign she was waiting for approval from her grandmother.
Yeah. As well. Yeah, it was a beautiful, I love that part.
I'm happy that you liked that. I'll show you the real photo because there is a photo.
Ooh, I read that part and I was like, I like gasped when I got to that part.
It doesn't, link anybody, but I was inspired by this photo of my grandparents at their prom, and I just think it's so like classic.
Oh my gosh, how
cute. So that's how I see it,
I love it.
And I mean,
their prom, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean the 50s were beautiful, like we've gone.
Yeah.
In some ways.
I have to be honest, I wondered and questioned the grandma's whole ploy with these predictable dates because, in a way, I feel it put a lot of pressure on everyone that she said this to, because you're forever waiting to verify. And if it's not working out, you're second guessing. Who did I miss today on the elevator, catching a cab, walking down the street? I almost wondered, is this like a grandmother who sits there and says, I really want to make sure that everyone that came after me is going to be paired up before I leave this earth. So I'm going to put it in their heads that they have to make it their business to find someone. You know, and I think that's a lot of, I think it's a pretty wish from a grandmother, but I think it's a little bit manipulative too. Like sometimes people don't find a soulmate and they have these beautifully fulfilled lives in different ways.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think a lot of people of that generation, you know, want to see their, you know, children and grandchildren partnered up, even if it's not necessarily in their best interests. But yeah, no, you're right. It is manipulative. It's a ton of pressure. I don't think I could have articulated this at the time, but like now looking back when I was writing the book, I think I was really writing about this idea that like we all have so much pressure on us, you know, like whether it's family expectations or, you know, the expectations that we have for ourselves about what our love lives might look like. I think that's really hard to shake off. So I have a newsletter that does short stories about love, and I wrote one about Gloria meeting her husband. So if you want to read it, you can do that for a little bit more, Gloria. And I'll drop
Oh, wow, great.
I subscribed to it, but I haven't looked at the is that the most recent one?
It's actually the first one.
One. Maybe that's why I missed it.
But if you go here and just scroll all the way down. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, she shared the link with us. Thank you.
As a New Yorker, I will say I also loved, like everybody else loved the Miami references, which I enjoyed as well. I loved all the New York and the Williamsburg and just, you know, you did such a good picture of painting life in New York and just like the energy of being there and just the way, I don't know, she walked over to her sister who lived a block down and, you know, it just, I don't know, I love that part. That was one of my favorite parts.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, next question. If Grandma Gloria had the power for predicting relationship dates for most of her family, why do you think this didn't play out for either of her granddaughters?
So I think that there could be somebody that they missed. That's my personal theory. I've heard others from other people, but I think, so it's two things, right? I think that there is somebody they missed, but I also think that if you choose to not follow the prophecy, it would still be okay. And I think a lot of people sort of feel that way about faith and spirituality and science, you know, like maybe you believe in one more than the other, but ultimately I think a lot of people believe that they coexist.
Yeah. And there was another one, I don't remember if it was a granddaughter or great granddaughter at the funeral who said she never wanted to know the date.
Yeah.
Yes. And I also wonder how many of those relatives either A, didn't follow it, but said they did, or B, maybe they followed it and aren't truly as happy as, you know, we think they are, right? From the little bit that we kind of know about those other relatives who found their soulmate on the date that the grandma had predicted.
Yeah.
Or they see that person with rose-colored glasses, you know. It's like Edie. Is it Edie or how do you pronounce it?
Edie. Yeah.
If she hadn't, if her sister hadn't told her that and she would have kept going with the idea that Theo was her soulmate, you know, she would have grown to love him the way that we grow to love, you know, people that we date.
Yeah, like up until that point, she was like pushing Theo to like fit this mold, I feel like.
Glorifying him, yeah.
And then after that, she was like, oh, maybe he's not that great.
Yeah.
I gave her permission to make her choice.
You did?
It's maybe the baby thing that broke it, that he didn't want to have kids, because that was like the real deal breaker for her. Otherwise, you know, she may have thought Theo was the one.
Yeah, non-negotiable.
I thought the whole Theo character was so fascinating. Imagine we're in a relationship that we're just exploring, and the person we meet tells us that, you know, this is it. You're the one because my grandmother, my aunt, whomever said that on this day that we met. That must be so freaky because Theo's mindset was completely in a different way. And now he's thinking they're wedging me into this compromise that I'm not willing to make. I just thought it was really interesting to see how things were playing out in his mind and from his perspective.
Oh, thank you. It was fun to work backwards and try to figure out, you know, what kind of person would be even just a tiny bit receptive to this. Like, it's a lot to say to somebody, but you know, what kind of person, you know, and he's a romantic and, you know, I think he's up for an adventure and yeah.
I thought he stuck around longer than expected. I thought he was going to bail immediately, but he tried to stick it out, you know, so cool. That was nice.
Well, and it worked out for him in another sense in that it got him his hit song.
Yeah.
Now that you brought up Theo, Ileana, I personally hated when his friends made her feel so bad at the bar.
Yes. Yes.
I get him sharing that with them, because if it was the other way around, I think I would tell all my girlfriends, but they would be sworn not to talk about it. Like, I think they ganged up on her so horribly, and he just sat there.
Yep.
That was the big red flag, red flag. He's not standing up for you. Run out the door. Like,
The initial.
I think you did a really good job with giving the details of emotions, because I felt everything she was feeling, whether it was him being romantic or him betraying her and her trust. Like, everything, I felt it.
Thank you.
I thought it was really important when her friend tells her, like, listen, everything he says about you is like surface. He doesn't like, and like the people that know her the closest are telling her, you know, we love you, we see all the, like, you're giving, you're kind and everything, and like this guy just like doesn't even brush on any of that. Like, I thought that was so, I think that's true, like, of a lot of guys. Like, they look at women and are just like, wear accessories, and they don't like often, like, the bad ones at least don't often like look deeper.
Yeah. I hated not hated in a way that like it was written poorly, like hated that she had to go through it when she was fighting with her sister and they didn't talk for weeks. I was like, make up already. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on the sister relationship of the book?
Yeah, especially because she knew like what a heavy hand that is to have to deal with. Like, I was just, how could you judge your sister so harshly when you know how hard this is to deal with? And I'm a sister as well, so like I can't fathom not talking to my sister for weeks over, you know, something that was gonna make her life great. But I guess she wasn't sure if it was gonna make her sister's life great. But if your sister's happy, then that's all you could really ask for.
It is. But also think about, I'm sure some of you have friends or maybe sisters who are with somebody and you're like, oh no, like maybe this is going to backfire in the long run. And like, how hard is that, you know?
Yeah. I think it also stirred emotions in her that she didn't want to deal with, right? Because knowing her sisters, I saw it that way. I saw it as she was worried about her sister, but I think more so she was kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, like this thing that I based my entire like personal / romantic life on may not be real, right? Or may not work, or it's being questioned, right? And so I think that kind of made her feel very strongly about it. But I think it's also a testament to the relationship with sisters, the fact that it's probably the only relationship where you could literally have the worst fight or say the worst things to each other, and for the most part, not always, but most people will come back and be able to, you know, kind of repair and go on as if maybe nothing's happened. So I did like the fact that it's like when she texted her, I believe the sister was like, okay, kind of like, are you over it, you know, like, are you done, like, are we gonna be good? And that was very sisterly.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, for everyone, what did you think of Edie getting together with Bennett at the end of the book? And why did you think what did you think of their relationship throughout the book? Hannah, I loved how you paired them together, and like that first scene when they were doing the invitations, it was like so platonic and friendly, but you could tell that they were both kind of flirty with each other the whole time.
Yeah. Is this question for me or is this question
for you first, and then anybody else that wants to chime in?
Yeah. I mean, I just had such a crush on Bennett, honestly. You know, I didn't want to be too obvious about the fact that they would wind up together in the end. And so, you know, I submitted the book to my editor and she was like, okay, great. But like, now you have to go back and drop clues that he's really hot. And so that's what I did for an afternoon. And it was great.
I never figured him hot.
Yeah, I got to make him hot. Or show that he's hot rather. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that I liked that he was just so unexpected, you know, like she didn't know she was going to meet him. You know, it wasn't the right day. She, you know, just didn't expect to have this spark with him at all, but like they're getting really close over a period of months. And I really liked that idea, like a friends to lovers trope. And yeah, he's just so sweet. I just like want to give him a hug. So Yeah, I think she needs somebody like that. She needs somebody who is really sweet and supportive and steady and caring and kind and understands the importance of family. And so if I were matchmaking them, like, I would put them together. So
I kind of felt like you showcased Bennett like kind of stepping in where Theo was like deficient, like at the grandmother's funeral and Shiva, like Bennett shows up and he kind of like says the right things and does the right things. And then like I really felt like when they were on the plane to Miami and just like they had such like a casual intimacy of like he's doing the crossword puzzle and he like just asks her and like they have like a very good flow the whole time, but without any like she's not nervous around him, she's not trying too hard, and it like naturally just like became this like I thought it was cute. I thought it was great. I like the kind of like you don't expect them necessarily to go together, but I loved it.
I think the plane ride and the Miami trip was where I was like, I see something there.
Maybe this year, I liked when he went after the funeral. That was my favorite part.
That part, and on the boat in Miami when like she's like, this guy's not texting me, and then Bennett's there.
Yeah. Or to go sit down while she stuffs envelopes. I mean, think about it. Not to stereotype, but most guys would be like, "What am I doing here?" Like, so I think that speaks to like his kindness, him being sweet. I also feel like, I don't know about you guys, but in my life, I feel like when I've least been looking or expecting, that's when the best relationships come, because you're not so, like we like to say, thirsty, like you're not like, oh, I wouldn't want to be single, or you're out always, like everything you're doing is about finding someone, and then you end up finding the worst people during that time. But when you're kind of like doing your thing, and at the time she obviously was going through, she was going through a breakup, but her, she was thriving professionally, like there's all this stuff, and she was kind of like, oh, let me call Bennett to like just have a buddy. Like she wasn't looking to fall in love with him, and it happened. So I feel like that's often the case.
Yeah.
It's funny because now as you guys talk about it, like I'm remembering more moments with him, because I honestly felt like there wasn't enough of him. And I know it's like purposeful so it wouldn't be so obvious, but I was like craving more of a relationship. I talked about it with Christy, like I was craving more of a relationship, like to see more of how they connected, because I did like them together. I thought it was great, but I was like, wait a second, I want more of the relationship. But now that you say it, there was a lot of moments they just felt like very kind of brief, like from afar,
like little nuggets.
Yeah.
I would love to write more about them in the future. Maybe not a whole book, like a short story. I don't think I'm a sequel person, but like a short story I would do about them because I just love them.
That was actually my last question. If we would see more of Edie and Bennett's story come out.
Oh, okay. Actually, one thing I can tell you, tiny spoiler. Hi to our little reader friends. Hello. In my next book that I'm working on, which I don't know when it's coming out, so this isn't very useful information, one character mentions that she sees Congressman Bennett Garcia and his wife, the fashion stylist.
Oh, Easter egg.
Love that. Okay, so they're in your next book.
Oh my
The book is not about them.
No, it's not. No, it's something I've done. In Meant to Be Mine, there's a small reference to like a local jewelry designer who is Eliza, who's the protagonist in my second book. In that book, there are little references to the first book. So yeah, it's something I like to do.
I like that. Emily Giffen does that too, where she like brings back main characters as like side characters.
Yeah. Good
strategy. On the story of Bennett and his, I guess, ex-girlfriend, I really liked I know it was just like a sideline of a story, but the whole political aspect, being that we had like just come off the elections, we were currently in the election, like I'm super far removed from that world. So getting a peek into it and seeing a woman running for office and the stereotypes she has to fight, I really liked that part too.
What can I ask? Was she kind of based on like AOC or just like a broader, like we need younger women running, or
a couple of different things? Yeah, so AOC was obviously a huge inspiration. Also, I don't know if the name Lauren Duca rings a bell. She was more, I feel like, in a couple of years ago, but she's somebody I knew who was this writer who was, like a good writer, but just, hadn't found fame. And then she went on, what is the name of the show? It's on Fox with Tucker Carlson, and she got into a fight with him and it went viral, and she was like catapulted to fame, like 500,000 followers, like book deals, all this great stuff. And she's brilliant. But seeing the backlash that she got and the hatred and the stress, but also like, you know, like how brilliantly she like defended herself, and like how, I don't know, just like how, you know, nobody expected her to be able to stand up to this guy, but she was. So yeah, that also inspired that character.
Is there a chance that we see more of that character? Will you be writing about her, like a story on her?
I could see it. It would be fun.
I like the Olivia Pope references.
Sorry?
Yeah, it
The
reminds me
Olivia
of
Pope reference
Oh, the Olivia
with
Pope.
her outfit and the clothes. That was cute.
I have her wine glasses. If you go to Crate and Barrel,
Crate and Barrel, yes.
Wine glasses. Yeah.
Love her.
I love that storyline. Like every time she came into play, I was all for it. And it was nice to see how different it is from what you see on TV of men running. Like she had to keep her relationship a secret, and they couldn't really be seen together. And the men put on a blue suit and a different colored tie, and women have to like think about their outfits so intrinsically.
That was actually specifically inspired by a couple of news stories about AOC. One was about her handbag. One, I think, was about her haircut. Like, and like people were.
Yeah, like she spends too much money and stuff.
We never found out after how she felt about Bennett's relationship with her. So I wonder how she would have felt, because they were obviously friends, all of them, and her stylist.
How Kiara felt about her.
And if she stayed her stylist, that's what.
Yeah. And if
Did she get fired as her stylist?
I think that they all worked it out. I think that Kiara and Bennett, you know, were not a great romantic love. You know, I think they're maybe a great platonic love. So I think it was fine. That's how I see it.
Does anybody have any questions for Hannah? I've asked all the ones I've had prepared, so the floor is open.
I was interested also, speaking of careers, of Edie's career as a stylist, and wondering like where you drew that inspiration from. I work in fashion, so I love those aspects of like her life.
You do in fashion?
I'm a buyer.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I would love to learn more about that world.
Yeah. Well, reach out. I'll write my name.
Yeah, no, I actually, that's how I did this. I mean, I knew a stylist and I said, can I interview you? And she just, you know, gave me a ton of just like, you know, inspiration, information about her life and her career. And the story about the rapper dripping the lobster juice all over his Gucci pants, that is real. The story about the pop star whose nails were too long to put on her own underwear, that is also real. So when she told me those, it was like, thank you. Thank you. And the a lot of the stuff in the book about politics I got from a friend of mine who is or was, I'm not sure, an organizer on Elizabeth Warren's campaigns. And so she was explaining to me like how people get those, you know, campaigns into motion, and that was really interesting.
Hannah, can you talk to us about, obviously you have, I don't know your specific degree, but I know that you've been in journalism, you've been in that world. How did you transition from being an editor and working in these different, for these different publishing companies to becoming an author? Like kind of what sparked that, and, you know, how was that process?
Yeah. So I went to school for a journalism degree, and I really wanted to work in magazines. I wanted to work in print magazines. By the time I graduated, like there really weren't print magazines anymore. But so I did a couple internships in college at different magazines, and one of them was at Elle, and there was this editor that I was obsessed with, and I was like, I will do absolutely anything if it means I get to work with this person. And one day she gave us, like, all the interns like sit in a little row, and she's like, oh, here's a task. And nobody wanted to do it because it was long, it was boring, it was tedious, nobody wanted it. And I was like, it's fine. And I did it, and at the end I thanked her, and we just struck up a conversation. And I knew that she was starting a matchmaking company, or had recently started a matchmaking company. And I mentioned to her that I did some like amateur matchmaking on campus. I would set up students, and then I would, like, on blind dates, and then I would write about how they went.
Oh.
Yeah. And she was like, oh, like, come work for me. And I was like, this is insane. I was 20 years old. And I was like, I have to go to school, but like, maybe
Like, I'll make it work.
yeah. So that summer I worked full-time, and then I worked part-time for the rest of the school year. But yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be a matchmaker. I just wanted to do anything that would put me in proximity to this person who's so brilliant. And I was very bad at matchmaking. It gave me the idea for my first book, Playing with Matches, which is like a fictionalized tale of a matchmaker working at a dating service, as I did. And then from there, like that was sort of the fiction side of my career. And that was taking off at the same time that I got my first job at 17 out of college. And so at 17, I was writing from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that's amazing. It was such a good opportunity, but it's not sustainable, especially if you want to be writing a book. So I thought, okay, I might as well switch to editing because that's a skill I want to learn. And also it's a different kind of muscle for your brain. It's just totally different. So I figured it would give me more time to write, and it did, and it worked out.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So it seems like a lot of the inspiration for your books are things that you've experienced, at least like the matchmaking. I'm like the opposite. I'm so not creative. So do you just sit and think of ideas and just like jot them and start putting pieces together, or how do you sit there and create a whole book like story like this, or any of I read Head Over Heels also, which I love. So I mean,
yeah, it's just different bits and pieces. For Head Over Heels, which is it's my book about Olympic gymnastics. I grew up as a gymnast, and it's just a world I'm obsessed with. And I was like, I want to spend like my mental, all my mental energy just thinking about gymnastics. And so from there, it's like, okay, like, well, gymnasts are teenagers. I don't write YA. So like, my character has to be older. Okay, so why would she be in gymnastics? Okay, she's a coach. Was she a former gymnast? And so like things like that, like asking yourself questions. One thing I find really helpful is going for a walk. There is something about being in motion that just makes you think differently. So when I was trying to do the idea for Meant to Be Mine, like this was, I think we were told we could go outside if we had masks. It was like that, like early part of the pandemic, or like just after they said like we should be wearing masks. And I remember just like walking in circles, like around the block outside, and just asking myself questions like, who are these people? Like, how are they all connected? Like, what is the drama? What is the conflict? And I think just like going outside and talking to yourself and just like jotting down notes in your phone, you look kind of nuts, but it's really cool.
You mentioned earlier that you kind of like mapped out the 3 main men, but didn't know how they were connected. So do you flesh out complete characters? Because in my idea, you sit down to write a book with an idea and you like move on through the storyline. Like, how did you get the men and like flesh them out, or I guess all the characters, before you interconnected them? Like, how does that thought process work?
So for Theo, he was the one that I thought of first. Do any of you guys watch Love Island?
Yes, sometimes.
Okay. Season 3, do you remember Alex? All the tattoos, blonde, he was with Olivia. Okay. Anyway, I was watching it with my sister, and we were very obsessed with him. And just like that look, I was like, oh, like, okay, like I've never done like a tattooed punk before. Like, let me try this. Like in my books. And the other men were sort of like, they had to be different from him. So it was just sort of a matter of like finding interesting ways to make the men distinct. And so I knew that I wanted a love interest, a like brother-in-law, the friend who becomes the lover, the ex. And so like I had all these different ideas, and I was like just shifting them around to figure out who would be best where. But Gloria, I knew right away who she was. Edie came second, but once I had her, I was like, this is my girl. And then Ray, like growing up, my best friends were twins. And, I think that I could see the way that they would try to, even if like in ways that were kind of similar, like try to differentiate themselves by like making opposite choices. And so that's sort of where the idea of Edie and Ray came from, in the sense that they have a lot of really similar values, and they are similar in some ways, but they're very, very different people.
And the Parisian friend, would we get to know more about her, or was she just what she was?
I mean, maybe they'll all come back in stories. I don't know, but she's based on a friend of mine, my friend who got married for the wedding that I was on the plane with. And it's true, she only dates French supermodels. Wild. And so her career also is, she works in recruiting. So she's like very high level recruiting. So like her job is basically yelling at old men. It's great. Like that's her job. So yeah, I was like, she needs to be in a book.
You need to be a very confident woman to be able to yell at old men.
Old rich men. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any questions?
I
Comments?
have a question. Was the prophecy based on anything real, like that sense of, somebody being able to tell bits of the future, so to speak?
It wasn't, but it actually occurred to me based on some advice from my agent when I was trying to figure out my next book. And she was like, the best ideas can be boiled down to one sentence or like one question. Like if the shorter you can explain it, the better. And so when I was walking around the neighborhood, just talking to myself, I was like, okay, like what if? And I figured like that would help me figure something out. And I was like, okay, like what if you knew the exact day that you were going to meet your soulmate? And so it sort of just came from there.
Does the Jewish faith believe in fate and soulmates and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So there's this concept called bashert, which is soulmate essentially. And actually, this is really interesting. I didn't know this until 2 hours ago. But I was at another book club or like book panel, and it was a panel of Jewish authors who had all written about matchmaking. And one of them had been to rabbinical school, like school to become a rabbi. And she mentions that in the Jewish faith, matchmaking it's like commanded by God. Like this is something that you have to do to, like help your community and help people around you. And like, if you see two people who should be together, like you should make that happen. And I didn't know that, but I think that's interesting. Yeah.
That's very cool. We have some Jewish ladies on here. Any of you experienced that?
Anybody, if anyone.
Well, no, I wasn't the result of matchmaking, but I do know that in the Orthodox community, that is definitely how matchmaking happens at a very young age. Sometimes children are children, and parents feel that the pairing of the family could be good for business or whatnot. And it's definitely the way of life, whether people like each other or not. Then there's even series that have been put together and shown on Netflix where you see the trouble and the travails of people.
Yeah. Indian matchmaking.
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh,
yeah. Well, that one is very, yeah, but that one's very over the top and beautiful fashion, and it's very funny. But I'm thinking, I'm trying to think of Unorthodox is the name of the series. And it's very sad to see how these women, they're young, they're babies, and they're made to wed, and the lives are miserable, and the boys don't know how to be good husbands. And it's just awful, awful existences. And then there's a part about divorce not being seen in a favorable light, because now you're dealing with families getting divorced. So, awful. It's really an awful, I mean, maybe they think it's beautiful, but seen on the outside, it seems like a very challenging way to live.
You know what? There was something that changed my perspective on that, and not entirely, because I do think it can be barbaric in some ways, but in the Indian matchmaking show that was also on Netflix, if any of you guys saw it, it showed like more modern Indian couples, and then some of like the older school, really traditional, they were set up. It was like, the dowry was paid and all of that. And some of these couples, it was kind of the same concept. They grew to love each other, and they have a beautiful, healthy relationship to this day. But at first they didn't even know each other, and they were just set up. But because they couldn't like leave each other, they learned to love each other. And that again goes back to my concept that like relationships are more about practicability and personalities, rather than soulmates and like butterflies. But anyways.
I actually wanted to mention something earlier with Gloria, because it's like, as independent as she was, like going back to she still wanted that like for her future, her grandchildren to have somebody. Like she still, even though she was like, okay, I'm independent but I want you guys to also be in a relationship. So that was kind of interesting, where it's like old with new traditions and generational differences. So she was more modern, but she still had that old mentality, like you had to be with someone.
Introducing you guys to Eloise.
What's his name?
This is Eloise, named after Eloise.
What a beauty.
Favorite book.
Yeah.
Eloise should be a character in one of your books. She's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Playing with Matches has a fat cat, and I'm not saying it's not inspired. We were talking about Vanessa, about like mixing the old and the new. That's something I'm really interested in. Like, how do we maybe like honor past generations, be it like our parents or our grandparents, and, you know, like enjoy and celebrate the traditions that they passed down to us, but maybe do it in a way that feels more authentic to our generation. It's something I think about a lot, especially in terms of like holidays and like, you know, as older people die, and, you know, I just think it's interesting. So that's why I wanted to write about that.
I actually just had a conversation with my grandma this morning, who just was calling me on the other line, and she is doing she was supposed to do a speech as a Holocaust survivor and doing a holobake tomorrow night, and she's not feeling well, but she still feels pressure on herself to go. And she goes, I think, you know, I think you should go and speak on my behalf and tell my story. And I was like, well, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. And she goes, yeah, but I want you to be able to, you know, continue my story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God. That's actually a big worry right now with Holocaust survivors, that they're the last generation of people that lived it, and they're so scared that it'll be forgotten.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about this for The Cut after my great uncle died at 98, and he was the last living, like the last like remaining Holocaust survivor in our family, and we know his story really well because, you know, he's talked about it and we know him, and just like meeting him, you can't escape it because like the accent and, you know, the whole thing. And like but yeah, I mean, like, how does the next generation learn? So I talked to other people who are also grandchildren of survivors, and it's really interesting to hear all those different perspectives on like how you continue those stories, or like, should you? I don't know, like different people have different perspectives.
Yes,
well, and there's this big argument for the people who lived through it that, you know, there's a part of society who believes it was all made up, and so how difficult for them in their flesh to have experienced it and then hear people say, well, that's just made up history, it really wasn't true. Imagine when you're not that survivor, you're not that generation, you're just somebody whose family was experiencing that horrible situation. It's easier to dissuade, you know, a family member and say, well, maybe your uncle said that that's what he went through, but maybe it wasn't true, maybe it was made up. So there's in our synagogue, it's a big theme, and there's a big preoccupation with teaching the newer generation of kids the importance of not forgetting. Remembering is a big deal.
I want to say that I'm 47, and I still remember when I was in junior high, because we called it that back then. So I was like 12, and we had a Holocaust survivor attend our auditorium for history class, and he allowed us all to walk up to him and see his, you know, tattoo numbers on his arm. And I will never forget that gentleman and just everything that he taught us in the, you know, hour that he was with us. So it's something that if you can go and speak on behalf of your grandmother, you know, I say do it, because it's impactful, and there's nothing like seeing someone who you have a connection with explaining. It's not the same as if you read it in a history book. You know stories that maybe you can relay in a certain way because it's your relative that a history book is not going to tell you.
I agree. My niece just read a YA novel with her class about it, and then they got to meet a Holocaust survivor, and she was calling me the minute she came home from school that day to tell me all about it. She's 10 now, but she was 9 at the time, and she was like, I cried the whole time. Why did they do this to these people? Like, it impacted her so much, and she's in a Christian school, so I think it's wonderful to continue to say those stories and beat out all those naysayers, because I can't believe that someone would doubt those stories or the history or anything that has been passed down for all these years so far.
And unfortunately, history does repeat itself.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a lot of like anti-Semitism recently. And I know it's been happening beyond what's been like on social media just the last few weeks or whatever, but I know it's like a big problem. It's almost like a responsibility to tell these stories, because you want to educate as many people as you can. And I mean, I don't know much about the Jewish culture. I try to learn about it, and I love to learn about all kinds of different cultures, but the more exposure that we get to it, you know, the better.
That's why I write stories about Jewish women, just because in New York, everybody's Jewish, but there are a lot of places where that's not the case. And if you can pick up a book in Wyoming and read about your first Jewish person, like, cool.
I agree. I would, on a lighter note, I would love to see a game of Mahjong. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes, that's it, Mahjong, perfect.
Exactly it.
Is this something you really get together with friends and play, or like with your family?
Yeah,
My grandma
with my
used to play
friends once a month, and our group chat is called "Don't Tell Your Grandma" because my grandma was very strict about the rules, and sometimes we have a little bit of wine and like forget a rule, and it's a whole thing if we do not tell our grandmas.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that. Like, does the younger generation still play with each other, or is it something you do with family?
It's weird that we play. Like we're in our mostly like late 20s, early 30s, and it's weird that we play. Like people are like, you should like be waiting 50 years for that. But yeah.
Because like in the Cuban culture, yeah, it's dominoes, but I don't play that with my friends unless it's like at a party, there's a table on the side, and you're usually playing with the grandfathers or the dads that are there.
Exactly. Like, is the expectation that like when you get older, you would play more?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more men than women, but women play too. But yeah.
I mean, because even at the family parties, it's like the older people are playing it on the side while everybody else is dancing and drinking and whatever. And so they're just playing dominoes. So yeah, I guess you do play more as you get older.
Yeah.
My mom has a friend that plays mahjong with another group of girlfriends of hers, and she is always like, she's too young to be playing that. What's she doing playing mahjong already? She's too young for that. She needs to wait longer, like you said.
Okay, we're at the hour, so I don't want to take up too much of Hannah's time. Any last questions or comments for her?
What part of Maine do you summer in or live in or family?
It's really tiny. Nobody's ever heard of it, but it's on the coast of, or not the coast, the border of New Hampshire.
I really enjoyed your photos from there this summer.
Thank you.
Like I wanted to switch places with you every day.
Yeah. You guys are such a fun book group. I really loved hanging out with you tonight. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
I have
you.
one question. From all of your books, which is your favorite? And if you were to recommend us to read another one, which would you suggest?
I feel like it's always, my favorite's always like the one I just wrote or the one I'm working on now. So Meant to Be Mine and the next one. But I would say read Playing with Matches because I think it's similar to Meant to Be Mine in a lot of ways.
I loved it.
Yep.
Can you tell us anything about what you're working on next or not yet?
I can't really, but I'll say it's also another sort of like big, interesting Jewish family. So,
okay. Well, we would love to have you back again if you're open to it. So thank you. We always take a photo at the end with our book, but before we do that, I just wanted to announce the next book. For this one, I kind of put it up as a vote on Instagram because I didn't know if you guys wanted to read something like holiday-ish for the holidays or a lighter read, but the whopping majority picked, any guess? It's With Us by Colleen Hoover. If you, I think some of you have already picked it up. I finished it last week and it's great. And it's not as heavy as the first one if that's something that intimidates you. So that's the next book. And we will be doing the holiday book exchange again. So stay tuned. I'll be sending info on that out in the next 2 weeks or so. Okay.
Awesome.
Photo time. So let me prepare this a second.
It's blurry.
Ready? 1, 2, 3, smile. I'm gonna do it one more time just in case. Prepare the screenshot. Oops. One, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you for being so open about your culture, your writing process, everything. It was a pleasure speaking to you. And thank you so much for sending us gifts to give away. We have 2 of the winners here. The third one has been kind of sick with COVID, so she didn't make it, but she did read. So it was Christy.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.